Welcome back to the deep dive.
Yeah.
Look, I want to start today by just asking you to look around wherever you are right now. Just do a quick scan.
Mm-hmm.
And unless you are, listening to this in a cabin deep in the woods, which sounds amazing, by the way, you are absolutely surrounded by them.
Oh, yeah. They're everywhere. The fine print of modern life.
Exactly. It's on the bottom of your toaster. It's stamped on the back of your TV. It's definitely on that little white brick you use to charge your phone.
And if you're brave enough to look, it is all over your monthly utility bill.
We are talking, of course, about the watt.
The watt. Yeah, it's a word we say constantly. A 60-watt bulb, a 1,000-watt microwave. But it's one of those terms that's kind of suffered from its own success.
How do you mean?
Well, we treat it like a brand name or like a size, small, medium, large, instead of what it actually is.
Which is the fundamental unit for how our entire civilization moves energy around.
That's the perfect way to put it. It's the currency of the physical world.
So that's our mission today. We're going to peel that little sticker off the toaster and really look at what's underneath. We've got a stack of notes here that'll take us from, the absolute basics.
The physics of it.
All the way to the cosmic scale. We're going to look at the history, the common mistakes that drive us crazy, and just the mind-blowing scale of it all.
We're going to go from the whisper of a radio signal to the roar of the sun.
So before we get to the galaxy brain stuff, we have to eat our vegetables. I have to define the term. Because if I went out on the street right now with a microphone and asked 10 people, what is a watt? I bet 9 of them would say something like, it's how bright a light bulb is.
Which is the classic misconception. It's understandable because for 100 years, that's how we bought light bulbs. But a watt has nothing to do with brightness, not directly.
Okay, so what is it?
It is strictly a unit of power.
Power. Now, in physics, that word power has a very, very specific meaning, right? It's not just about strength or influence.
Right. In the International System of Units, the SI system that scientists use, the watt is defined as the rate of energy transfer.
The rate, okay, that's the key word.
It is the key word. The fundamental equation, the one that basically runs the universe, is this. 1 watt equals 1 joule per second.
Okay, stop right there. I want to unpack that.
Yeah.
Because joule is one of those words that everyone hears in high school physics.
Yep.
Memorizes for the tests, and then immediately deletes from their brain to make room for, I don't know, song lyrics.
It happens to the best of us.
So if we don't get the joule, we can't get the watt. So forget the textbook. What is a joule? What does it feel like?
That is the right question to ask. Think of the joule as the stuff. It's the raw quantity of energy. It's the work you actually perform.
Give me a physical example.
Okay, look around you. Pick up something small. An apple. A standard apple weighs about 100 grams.
Okay, I am holding a hypothetical apple.
Now, lift that apple 1 meter into the air, let's say from your waist up to about your shoulder. Congratulations, you just expended 1 joule of energy.
That's it. That felt like nothing.
It's tiny. 1 joule is a very small bucket of energy. It's just the energy needed to lift a small apple 1 meter against gravity. Now, here is where the watt comes in.
Okay.
The watt is all about time.
Right.
If you lift that apple from your waist to your shoulder in exactly 1 second, you are generating 1 watt of power.
So 1 apple plus 1 meter plus 1 second equals 1 watt.
Precisely. But let's say you're feeling a bit lazy. You take 10 seconds to lift that apple. You do it really, really slowly.
Okay, but I'm still moving the same distance. The mass is the same. Gravity is the same. So the joules, it has to be the same, right?
Exactly. You still did 1 joule of work, but because you took 10 seconds to do it, your wattage is only 0.1 watts.
I see. So the joule is what I did. The watt is how fast I did it.
Or how intense the effort was in that time frame. Think of it like water. A joule is a gallon of water. A watt is the flow rate.
Oh, I like that.
It's how wide you open the tap. You can fill a bucket with a trickle, that's low wattage, or you can fill it with a fire hose, which is high wattage.
But the bucket gets full either way.
Right. The amount of water is the same, but the rate is totally different.
That's a great analogy. It turns a static number into a dynamic action. It's all about movement.
And it's not just for electricity. This is another big misconception. Because we see watts on our appliances, we think it's an electrical term.
But it's not.
It's a physics term. You can measure the power of a horse, a steam engine, a nuclear reaction, or your own body in watts.
It just happens that electricity is where we need to measure that flow most often in our daily lives.
Exactly right.
Speaking of steam engines, though,
Yeah.
that brings us to the name, the Watt, named after James Watt.
And the irony here is just It's perfect. James Watt was a Scottish inventor, 18th century. He's famous for making massive improvements to the steam engine around 1776.
Which basically kicked off the Industrial Revolution.
It did. But here's the thing. James Watt died in 1819. The electrical grid, light bulbs, toasters, none of that was even a dream yet.
So the guy whose name is on every electrical device probably never even saw a light bulb.
Oh, definitely not. He was a mechanical guy. He dealt with pistons and valves and steam and heat. He was covered in grease, not wrapping copper wire.
So how does his name end up on my microwave?
It's a fantastic bit of history, really, and it's kind of about marketing. We'll get into the specifics later, but you have to understand that James Watt was the first person to really treat power as a product.
A product? What do you mean?
Before Watt, if you wanted work done, you used horses. And you didn't measure the power of a horse, you fed it and hoped it kept going.
Right.
But Watt built a machine. He had to sell that machine to, say, mine owners who are used to using ponies to haul stuff. He needed a conversion rate.
He had to be able to tell them, my new engine is worth 20 of your best horses.
Exactly. So James Watt literally invented the concept of horsepower as a marketing tool for his steam engines. He gave the world the first clear physical conception of power.
He commoditized it.
He did, and that's why decades later, when scientists were scrambling for a name for the unit of power, they picked him.
He made it something you could put on a receipt.
Precisely.
Okay, I want to ground this for a minute, because 1 joule per second, or lifting an apple, is great for a definition, but it feels very small. What does a watt feel like when we talk about real human effort? If I'm generating 1 watt, am I even breaking a sweat?
Not at all. As we said, 1 watt is just lifting an apple. To really feel it, we need a better workout. We've got a great example in the notes here, the stair climber scenario.
Oh, I love a good word problem. Lay it on me.
Okay, picture this. You have a person. Let's make him a pretty solid guy, a mass of 100 kilograms.
So that's about 220 pounds, a big guy.
Right. And he's standing in front of a ladder. The ladder is 3 meters high, so roughly 1 story of a building.
Okay.
And he climbs that ladder in 5 seconds.
Whoa, 3 meters in 5 seconds.
Yeah.
That's moving. That's not a casual climb, that's a hustle.
He's definitely hustling. So let's calculate his power. Let's see how many watts he's generating. First, we need the work he did in joules.
And the formula for that is mass times gravity times height, right?
Correct. So we have 100 kilograms times the acceleration of gravity, which is about 9.8, times the height, which is 3 meters.
Okay, let's see. 100 times 9.8 is 980 times 3, that's what, just under 3,000? 2,940.
Spot on. So he did 2,940 joules of work moving his mass up that ladder.
That is a lot of apples.
It is. But now we need the power. And power is work divided by time. He did all that work in 5 seconds. So 2,940 divided by 5.
That's going to be just under 600. Let's call it 600 watts.
588 to be precise.
Yeah.
But 600 is a great number to work with. So a large man sprinting up a flight of stairs is generating about 600 watts of power.
600 watts. Is that a lot? I honestly don't have a feel for it.
For a human, it's incredibly high. That's a significant physical burst. If you've ever been on an exercise bike that shows your wattage, try to hit 600 watts. You might do it for a few seconds, but your legs will be on fire.
Absolutely. I feel like I'm dying if I try to hold 300 for more than a minute. So 600 is basically athlete level burst.
It is. It's unsustainable.
Yeah.
So let's look at sustained power. What's the idle speed of a human doing manual labor?
The laborer benchmark.
Yes. Over an 8-hour day, digging a ditch, moving boxes, consistent physical work. A healthy laborer can sustain an average output of about 75 watts.
75 watts.
75.
That is, honestly, that's a little humbling. A human being, this incredibly complex biological machine, works all day long and produces about the same amount of power as one of those old school incandescent light bulbs.
It really puts things in perspective, doesn't it? We think of ourselves as these powerful beings, but energetically, we're basically dim light bulbs.
So if I'm just sitting here in this chair talking into a microphone, I'm putting out even less.
You're probably closer to 60 or 70 watts, and most of that is just waste heat. You're basically a space heater with anxiety.
Huh. Thanks for that. But this comparison is actually crucial for understanding history, isn't it?
Absolutely crucial. Before the steam engine, if you wanted to move something heavy, you needed muscle, human or animal. If you wanted 600 watts of continuous power, you'd need 8 people working in shifts.
And today, you just plug in a small motor.
You've outsourced the watts.
So we have the human scale. A sprint is 600 watts. A long workday is 75. What about the environment? What's a baseline for the planet itself?
The standard benchmark there is what's called the solar constant. If you go to the equator on a clear day, right at noon,
Okay.
and you measure the sunlight hitting a patch of ground that is 1 square meter.
So like a small rug or a beach towel.
Exactly. That patch of ground is receiving about 1 kilowatt of power from the sun.
1 kilowatt, that's 1,000 watts.
Roughly 1,000 watts. That's the energy bath we're all standing in when we go outside on a sunny day.
So the sun is beaming down about 13 human laborers worth of energy onto every single square meter of the ground.
That's a fantastic way to visualize it. Every time you lay down your beach towel, you've got 13 invisible laborers just pouring energy onto you.
No wonder I get a sunburn so fast.
So we've established this middle ground, right? The human scale, 75 watts, the 1,000 watts. But now I want to stretch this out. The source material breaks down the multiples and submultiples of the watt, and this is where it gets really wild.
Okay, let's do it.
We're going to zoom way into the invisible world and then zoom way out to the cosmos.
Let's start small, down the rabbit hole.
First stop, milliwatts. That's 1,000th of a watt.
What lives down here?
This is home to a lot of precision electronics. A typical laser pointer, the kind you use to play with your cat,
Yeah.
that's about 5 milliwatts.
That seems so tiny for something that bright.
It's very focused light, but in terms of raw energy flow, it's minuscule. Another great example is a hearing aid. A modern hearing aid runs on less than 1 milliwatt of power.
That is amazing efficiency.
Yeah.
It's listening, processing, amplifying, driving a tiny speaker, all on less than 1,000th of a watt.
It just shows you how far our microelectronics have come.
Okay, let's go smaller. Microwatts. 1 millionth of a watt.
Now we're getting into really delicate territory. This is the scale of the electrical signals in the human body.
We have electrical signals.
Oh, yeah. When you go to the hospital and they hook you up for an EEG to measure your brainwaves or an ECG for your heart, those machines are picking up signals that are in the microwatt range.
So our brains are operating on millionths of a watt.
The signals that we can detect on the outside, on the skin, are that faint, yes. It's also the scale for those little solar cells in old calculators. Remember those?
The ones that never died. I always wondered how they worked with just the dim light in an office.
They were just sipping on microwatts. They barely needed anything to run.
Okay, smaller still.
Femtowatts.
Femto. That sounds like a made-up word.
It's 10 to the minus 15 watts. 1/4,000th of a watt.
What on earth could possibly be that faint?
Radio signals.
Wait, really? The radio tower looks huge.
The tower itself blasts out thousands of watts. But by the time that radio wave travels 10 miles, bounces off a few buildings, goes through your car window, and hits that tiny little metal antenna, the energy that actually arrives is in the femtowatt range.
That is unbelievable.
It's like a ghost of the original signal.
Yet my car stereo can turn that into clear music.
That's the miracle of amplification. We build technology that listens to a whisper that's 1/4,000th of a watt and boosts it back up so we can hear it. It's the technology of listening to the very edge of nothingness.
Have we hit the bottom yet? Or is there smaller?
We can go to the attawatt, 10 to the minus 18.
Attawatt. Wow.
This is mostly used in things like underwater acoustics. The reference for sound pressure in water is measured on this scale.
Right.
We're really splitting hairs on an atomic level now.
It just highlights how incredibly sensitive our instruments have become. We aren't just measuring the roar, we're measuring the silence.
We really are, but now let's reverse course. Let's climb back up the ladder.
Great.
Past the hearing aid, past the human laborer, past the 1,000-watt space heater.
Let's go big. Kilowatts we know, that's the house.
Yeah.
What's next?
The megawatt, 1 million watts.
Now we're talking heavy machinery.
This is industrial scale. Think of a high-speed train, that Eurostar train that goes through the tunnel.
Yeah.
It can pull more than 12 megawatts of power.
12 megawatts. That's like 12,000 of those space heaters all running at once.
Just to move that train, it takes a lot of energy to push that much metal at 300 kilometers an hour. We also see this scale for things like large data centers or individual power plants.
Which brings us to the gigawatt.
1 billion watts. This is the city scale.
I always think of Back to the Future. 1.21 gigawatts.
And Doc Brown was actually pretty on the money with the magnitude. 1 gigawatt is roughly the average power consumption for a modern city of about 1.8 million people.
1 gigawatt.
Yeah.
One major city.
It's a good rule of thumb. And here's a fun weather fact for you. Lightning.
Tell me.
An average lightning strike peaks at about 1 terawatt.
Wait, terawatt. We skipped a step. That's 1 trillion watts.
We did. Lightning is absurdly powerful, but, and this is a big but, only for a tiny, tiny fraction of a second.
They're tiny.
About 30 microseconds. So while its peak power is a terawatt, it doesn't actually deliver that much total energy. It's a flash in the pan.
So a lightning bolt is a terawatt spike. What about sustained terawatts? Where do we see that?
The terawatt is the global scale. If you take every single thing humans do, every car, every factory, every light bulb, every server farm,
The whole of human
the
civilization.
whole show. In 2019, our average continuous power consumption was about 18 terawatts.
18 terawatts. That is the constant hum of humanity.
18 trillion joules every single second.
That sounds absolutely massive.
It is, but compared to the Earth itself, the planet generates its own heat from the core. Radioactive decay, leftover heat from its formation.
Right.
The Earth's own internal heat emission is about 47 terawatts.
That's interesting. So human civilization is now using about a third of the power that the Earth itself radiates from its core.
We're catching up to the planet. We're becoming a geological force in our own right.
But we're still small fry.
Oh, we're tiny compared to the next level, the petawatt. 1 quadrillion watts.
Okay, now the numbers are just getting silly.
Now we are leaving the scale of anything humans consume and entering the scale of planetary bombardment. The total sunlight striking the Earth's atmosphere is estimated at 174 petawatts.
Whoa, pause there. Let me do that math.
Yeah.
We use 18 terawatts,
Right.
and the Earth is hit by 174 petawatts of sunlight.
That's right. And a petawatt is 1,000 terawatts. So the solar energy hitting our atmosphere is roughly 10,000 times greater than all the energy our civilization uses.
We are swimming in energy.
We are drowning in it. It's just a matter of capturing it. But here's a plot twist. Humans can create petawatts.
You just said we only use 18 terawatts.
We can create petawatts, but only for the most impossibly small fraction of a second.
Let me guess. Lasers again.
Lasers again. Specifically, the NOVA laser at Lawrence Livermore National Lab. It achieved a power output of 1.25 petawatts.
Hold on. You're telling me one lab in California fired a laser that was, for a moment, more than 100 times more powerful than the entire global power grid combined?
Yes. But, and here's the catch, only for about 0.5 picoseconds.
A picosecond. That's a trillionth of a second.
And this is where the math of the watt gets so fun. Remember, watts are joules divided by seconds. So to get a huge number for watts, you can either have a massive number of joules, or you can divide by a tiny, tiny, tiny number of seconds.
We're hacking the equation.
Exactly. The total energy in that entire laser shot, it was only about 600 joules.
600 joules? Wait a minute. Go back to our stair climber. Bob. He did almost 3,000 joules of work.
Right.
So you're telling me Bob climbing a ladder has 5 times more energy than this world record-breaking super laser?
In terms of raw energy quantity,
Yeah.
the joules, yes. If that laser hit a cup of coffee, it would barely warm it up. But the delivery is what matters.
The rate.
Bob took 5 seconds to deliver his 3,000 joules. The laser delivered its 600 joules in half a trillionth of a second.
It's the difference between a gentle rain falling for a whole year versus a tsunami hitting all at once.
Perfect analogy. The volume of water might be the same, but the power, the destructive force, is totally different.
So how do they even do that?
They use a technique called chirped pulse amplification. Imagine you have a huge crowd of people trying to get through a single door.
Okay.
That's your energy pulse. If they walk through single file, the power at the door is low, 1 person per second.
Right.
What CPA does basically is it stretches that line out, amplifies everyone so they become giants, and then at the very last moment, it compresses the line so that every single giant runs through the door at the exact same instant.
A billion giants squeezing through the door in a picosecond.
And for that tiny moment, the intensity, the wattage is astronomical.
That's the perfect illustration of why the per second part of the definition is so important.
It's everything.
Okay, final boss level, the yottawatt, 10 to the 24th watts.
The yottawatt, this is the sun. The total power output of our star is 382.8 yottawatts.
I can't even hold that number in my head.
Think of it this way. The sun outputs about 2 billion times the power that actually hits the Earth. That 174 petawatts we talked about, that's just the tiny crumb that happens to fall on us.
And that crumb is enough to power our world 10,000 times over.
And the rest, it just blasts out into the void, a constant, unimaginable roar of energy.
It really makes you feel small, doesn't it? From the femtowatt whisper of a radio to the yottawatt scream of the sun.
And we're just sitting here in the middle trying to keep our lights on.
Okay, so we've done the scale, but I want to circle back to the name, James Watt. We established he was the scheme guy, not the electricity guy. So how specifically did his name end up on my light bulb?
It's one of history's great branding exercises. You have to imagine being an engineer in 1882. The electrical industry is brand new. It's the Wild West. People are measuring power in all these weird, clunky units. Foot-pounds, gravity force, you name it.
It's messy. You can't build a global industry if you can't even agree on what a unit of power is.
Exactly. So this guy, C. William Siemens, he stands up at this big science conference and proposes they name the unit of power after James Watt.
And his argument wasn't that Watt discovered electricity.
No, not at all. His argument was that Watt was the first person to treat power as a commercial product. As we said, he commoditized it.
He made it something you could measure and sell.
Siemens's argument was that James Watt gave the world a physical conception of power. He made it tangible, and so the scientists agreed.
So every time I pay my electric bill, I'm kind of participating in the market that James Watt created.
In a way, yes. He didn't know what an electron was, but he knew how to sell the ability to do work.
Now, the actual definition of the watt has been refined a bit since then, right? It's not just a name.
It has. This is for the metrology nerds out there. Originally, they created something called the International Watt, and it was a practical unit. It was defined by, physical experiments.
Like the prototype kilogram they kept in a vault in France?
Oh, a similar idea.
Yeah.
But physicists hate that stuff. Artifacts can change, they can degrade. They want absolute units that are derived from fundamental constants.
So meters, kilograms, seconds.
Right. So in 1948, they officially redefined it. They moved from the international watt to the absolute watt.
Did that change the value? Did everyone's light bulbs get dimmer?
No, this is a tiny change.
Mm-hmm.
1 absolute watt equaled 1.000019 international watts.
It's totally unnoticeable.
For the average person, completely. But for precision science, it was a necessary fix. And since 1960, the absolute watt has been the standard, 1 joule per second.
And just to close the loop for the electrical crowd, how does it relate to volts and amps? That's the other formula we all learned.
Right. The electrical definition is that 1 watt equals 1 volt times 1 ampere.
W equals V times A.
Exactly. If you have 10 volts pushing 2 amps of current, you have 20 watts of power.
Simple enough. But I feel a gotcha coming.
There's always a gotcha in electricity. That simple formula works perfectly for direct current DC or for simple things like a heater. But when you get into alternating current, AC, with motors and things, it gets more complicated.
Let's not go there today.
No, that's a whole other deep dive on something called power factor.
Okay, but there's another distinction that drives me crazy, and I know it drives you crazy too. It's the most common point of confusion.
Oh, I know exactly where you're going.
Watt versus watt hour.
Yes. And the dreaded phrase, watts per hour.
It's like nails on a chalkboard. Please, set the record straight for everyone once and for all.
Okay. It's power versus energy.
Right.
Power measured in watts is the rate. It's the speed. Energy measured in watt hours is the quantity. It's the total amount.
Use the car analogy. I find that really helps.
Perfect. The watt is your speedometer. I'm going 60 miles per hour. That's your power.
Okay.
The watt hour is your odometer. I have traveled 60 miles. That's your energy.
So if I have a 100-watt light bulb, that's its speed. It consumes energy at a rate of 100 joules every second.
Correct. And if you leave that 100-watt bulb on for 1 hour, you have used 100 watt-hours of energy.
And if I have a 50-watt bulb, but I leave it on for 2 hours?
50 watts times 2 hours is 100 watt-hours. You've used the exact same quantity of energy, even though the first bulb was twice as powerful.
It just did it twice as fast.
Exactly. And this is why saying watts per hour is almost always wrong. When someone says, this toaster uses 1,000 watts per hour.
It makes no sense. It's like saying I'm driving 60 miles per hour.
Which would be acceleration. So unless you were talking about a power plant literally accelerating its output, the phrase is meaningless. You just mean watts. Or if you're talking about total consumption, you mean watt hours.
This has been a public service announcement.
Please check your units.
There's one more distinction we need to make, especially when talking about power plants.
Yeah.
The difference between electrical megawatts and thermal megawatts.
The little subscript letters.
Yeah.
MW sub E versus MW sub T.
Right. You see this in technical documents, and it's so important for understanding efficiency, or more often, inefficiency.
Yeah, walk me through it with a nuclear plant, because the numbers in the notes are pretty staggering.
Okay, so take the Ambals plant in Argentina. The source material lists its output as 2,109 megawatts thermal, MOIDed. That is the raw heat, the sheer violence of splitting atoms inside the reactor core.
2 gigawatts of raw heat, that's a lot.
It is, but the electrical output, the MW, the stuff that actually comes out of the power lines, is only 648 megawatts.
Wait, so you're putting in over 2,000 units of heat, and you're only getting 648 units of electricity out. That's barely 30% efficiency.
It's about 30 to 33%, and that is completely standard for almost all thermal power plants. Coal, gas, nuclear, it doesn't matter.
So where does the other 70% go? You're splitting the atom, creating this immense power, and you throw 2/3 of it away.
We dump it, it goes up the cooling towers as steam, or it gets pumped into a river as warm water. That's the waste heat.
That seems incredibly wasteful.
It is, but it's not bad engineering. It's just physics. The second law of thermodynamics demands a tax. You cannot convert heat into work with 100% efficiency.
So when I read a news article that says a new power plant will produce 2,000 megawatts, I need to be very skeptical.
You have to ask, is that the heat you're making? Or is that the electricity I can actually use? Because if they're quoting the thermal number, they're inflating the useful power by a factor of 3.
That is a huge gotcha for anyone trying to understand our energy grid.
It really is. We're still just boiling water to spin a wheel, just like James Watt was doing.
In a lot of ways, yeah. Whether it's burning coal or splitting atoms, we're just finding very fancy ways to turn a turbine.
Which is why something like a solar panel is so different. It goes straight from light to electrical watts. But
yeah,
that's a topic for another day.
For sure.
Okay, so we have covered a lot of ground. We climbed the ladder with Bob at 600 watts. We dug ditches at 75 watts. We've looked at the 174 petawatts of sunlight hitting the planet, and we have stared into the 382 yottawatt face of the sun.
We also corrected some grammar along the way. No more watts per hour.
Never again. And we learned that our entire civilization runs on about 18 terawatts of continuous power.
So what's the big takeaway from all this? For me, it's that the watt isn't just a number on a sticker, it's a common language.
It is. It lets us compare the heartbeat of a mouse in milliwatts to the output of a star in yottawatts using the same ruler. It unifies biology, machines, and the cosmos.
And it also shows us the potential.
How so?
Well, we kept coming back to that one number. The Earth receives 174 petawatts of solar energy.
Right, and we use 18 terawatts.
That means the energy striking the planet is roughly 10,000 times more than everything we use to run our civilization.
We are swimming in an ocean of energy that we barely even dip our toes into.
Exactly. We are scraping and drilling for fossil fuels while being constantly bathed in 10,000 times our needs from above. The watt helps us quantify that gap. It shows us just how small our consumption is compared to what's available if we can just figure out how to catch it.
That's a provocative thought to end on. We're not energy poor. We just need better buckets.
Better buckets, measured in watts.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the power of the watt. Next time you flip a switch, think about the joules per second flowing through that wire and the yottawatt star that likely started it all.
See you next time.
Keep wondering.
Welcome back to the deep dive. Today I want to start with a scenario that I think is going to
Trigger some people.
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
It is going to trigger a little bit of PTSD for every single person listening right now.
Uh-oh. Starting off light today, are we?
Always. No, but seriously, picture this. You are back in university, or maybe it's a certification you did for work last year.
Right.
And you have the big exam coming up. You clear your schedule. You buy the energy drinks. You lock yourself in a room for 48 hours straight.
Oh, yeah, the classic mass practice session.
Exactly. You highlight the entire textbook. You make the flashcards. You cram. You are just a machine.
And you feel productive doing it, too.
You do. And you walk into that exam room and you completely crush it. You get the A. You get the certificate. You feel like an absolute genius. But then...
You get 2 weeks.
Yes, the fade. 2 weeks later, it's not just a fade, it's a total wipeout. Someone asks you a basic question about that topic you spent 48 hours obsessing over, and you just stare at them blankly.
It evaporates.
It's gone. It's like the file was corrupted and deleted from your hard drive.
And usually that is exactly when the self-loathing kicks in.
Yes. We think, oh, I have a terrible memory. Or, I'm just not smart enough to hold on to this complex stuff. We treat it as a personal failure.
Which is completely the wrong way to look at it.
Right. Because what if I told you, and what if the massive stack of sources we have today tells you that the problem isn't your brain at all? The problem is the schedule.
That is the key word right there, the schedule.
Because today we are diving deep into spaced repetition. And I want to be super clear right off the bat here. This is not just a study tip.
No, definitely not.
This isn't like try using a different color highlighter or listen to classical music. This is a fundamental hack for the human brain's storage system.
It really is. And I'm glad you used the word hack because it implies we're getting under the hood of the machine. Spaced repetition is a deeply evidence-based technique.
And it exploits specific psychological principles, right?
Exactly. It exploits the biological and psychological principles of how our minds actually encode long-term memory. It is the difference between treating your brain like a leaky bucket that you're frantically trying to refill.
Which is the cramming.
Right. Versus treating it like a muscle that you are systematically training over time.
And we really do have a fascinating stack of material today. We are going to cover history that goes back to the 1880s, which is wild to me.
Yeah, the timeline is pretty incredible.
We've got studies on sixth graders in Iowa from the 1930s. We have modern computer algorithms, neurosurgery training, and even applications for Alzheimer's patients.
The scope of where this applies is huge.
It is. So the mission for this deep dive is to explore how we as everyday learners can manipulate what is called the psychological spacing effect.
And if we get this right, the literature suggests we can increase the rate of learning dramatically and theoretically retain information indefinitely.
Indefinitely. I mean, that is a bold claim. So let's unpack this right away. What exactly is spaced repetition? If you had to define it for someone who has never heard the term, how do you break it down?
At its most basic level, spaced repetition is a learning technique where newly introduced or more difficult items are shown to you frequently, while older, easier items are shown less frequently.
So it acts almost like a filter?
It's a filter and a dynamic scheduler. Because in a traditional cramming session, you might review the same fact. Let's say you're learning the French word for apple. You might review it 20 times in 1 hour.
Right. Palm, 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 I got it.
Exactly. And you feel good because by the 20th time, it feels incredibly easy.
But spaced repetition says no.
Right. It says, show it to me once, then wait.
Wait until when?
Wait until the memory starts to decay. Wait until it is almost completely gone. Then and only then do you show it again.
See, that sounds so risky to me. You are intentionally letting yourself almost forget.
That risk is exactly where the learning happens. The goal is to maximize the efficiency of your attention, because why waste time reviewing Palm if you already know it?
You're just spinning your wheels.
Exactly. You should be spending that mental energy on the words you don't know. The system ensures you are always operating right at the edge of your ability.
Okay, so that's the what. But to truly understand the how and the why, we really have to go back in time. We need to talk about the grandfather of this whole field.
Ah, yes, Hermann Ebbinghaus.
This guy sounds like a character. We are talking 1880s Germany, no computers, no fMRI scans, just a guy with a lot of time and a very specific curiosity about the brain.
Ebbinghaus is an absolute legend in psychology because he brought the rigorous scientific method to something as abstract as human memory.
Because before him, it was mostly philosophy, right?
Yeah, people thought about memory philosophically or qualitatively. Ebbinghaus wanted hard data, but he immediately ran into a problem.
What was the problem?
Associations. If he tried to study how well he could remember a poem or, say, a list of famous European cities, his previous knowledge would interfere with the data.
Because if he likes a poem, he naturally remembers it better.
Exactly. Or if he's actually visited the city, he remembers it better. That is not pure memory at work. That is association.
So he needed raw data. He needed data with zero pre-existing meaning.
Right. So he invented what he called nonsense syllables. Thousands of them. They were CVC trigrams, consonant, vowel, consonant.
So words like WID?
Yes, WIDZOFTUV. They meant absolutely nothing in German or English or any language.
So he just sat there and memorized lists of absolute gibberish.
For years, and he used himself as the only test subject, an N=1 study. He would memorize a list of these nonsense sounds until he could recite them perfectly.
Okay.
Then he would set a timer, maybe 20 minutes, maybe an hour, maybe a full day. And then he would test himself again to see exactly how much he retained.
And what did he find? Because I have a feeling it wasn't great news for those of us who like to procrastinate.
No, it's pretty devastating, actually. He plotted all his results on a graph, and he created one of those famous concepts in all of cognitive psychology, the forgetting curve.
The forgetting curve? It honestly sounds like the title of a horror movie.
It basically is a horror movie if you're a student. It mathematically shows that memory loss isn't linear. It doesn't just slowly fade at a steady pace. It is exponential.
So the drop-off is fastest right at the beginning.
The steepest drop is immediately after you learn something. Within 20 minutes, you might lose 40% of what you literally just learned.
40% in 20 minutes.
Yeah. And within 24 hours, you have lost about 70%.
70% of the material in one day. That is staggering.
It's roughly that, yeah. And within a week, you are down to almost nothing. The curve levels off eventually, but the vast majority of the newly acquired information just falls off a cliff immediately.
Well, that explains so much. That explains exactly why you can sit in a brilliant lecture, understand everything perfectly, nod along feeling so smart.
And then you walk out the door.
Yeah, by the time you get to your car in the parking lot, the concepts are already getting hazy.
Exactly. Your brain is aggressively deleting that information because it hasn't been signaled that the information is actually important for your survival.
So Ebbinghaus maps out this disaster of a curve, but the genius is he didn't stop there. He actually figured out how to hack it.
He did. He discovered that if he reviewed the list of syllables just once, say 24 hours later, he didn't just remember it for that moment. The actual shape of the curve changed for the next time.
It flattened out.
Yes. The decay wasn't as steep the second time around. And if he reviewed it again 3 days later, the curve got even flatter.
Wow.
Each review acts like a breakwater against the tide of forgetting. Eventually, after enough spaced reviews, the curve becomes almost a completely flat line. You retain the information indefinitely.
So the real secret isn't just the repetition itself. It is the specific spacing of the repetition.
Precisely. If he had reviewed the list 10 times immediately after learning it, the curve wouldn't have changed much at all. It was the passage of time, the actual act of forgetting, that primed his brain to re-encode the memory much stronger.
And this brings us to a really fascinating concept in the research. It's called the effort principle.
This is critical to understand, and for most people, it is completely counterintuitive.
Right, because usually we think that if we're studying and it feels super easy, if we're just flying through the flashcards without thinking we're doing a great job, we feel like we're in the zone.
But the research tells us that easy is actually the enemy of retention.
Unpack that for me. Why is easy a bad thing when you're trying to learn?
Think about it in physical terms. If you go to the gym and you lift a weight that is as light as a feather, do you build any muscle?
Obviously not. You need resistance. You need to strain the muscle fibers to get them to rebuild stronger.
Memory works the exact same way. The effort principle basically states that the more effort required to retrieve a memory, the greater the strengthening of that memory trace will be.
So that moment of sheer panic, that moment when I'm staring at a flashcard and I know the answer, but I'm scrunching up my face and sweating a little bit, digging through my brain, that struggle is the learning.
That struggle is the magic. That is your brain physically strengthening the neural pathway to that specific piece of information. When you cram or when you just casually reread a highlighted textbook, you aren't struggling at all. You're just recognizing.
Recognition versus recall.
It is a huge difference. Recognition is simply saying, oh, yeah, I've seen that before. Recall is saying, I have to reconstruct this entire concept from scratch.
I see.
Spaced repetition forces you to rely on active recall right at the exact moment when it's hardest, right before you forget it entirely.
It's almost like waiting until a path in the jungle has almost grown over with thick vines and then forcing yourself to hack your way through it all over again. And that act of hacking actually widens the path permanently.
That is a perfect analogy. Because if you just walk back and forth on a completely clear path all day, you aren't doing any real work. You have to let the jungle grow back a bit.
Now, digging into the research a bit more, there seems to be a debate among the experts on how exactly to schedule this jungle hacking. We have uniform intervals versus expanding intervals. What is the distinction there?
So the classic model, the one that Ebbinghaus hinted at and later researchers like Landauer and Bjork really formalized in the 70s, is expanding intervals.
Okay.
This means the gaps between your reviews get progressively bigger and bigger. So you review a fact after 1 day, then maybe 3 days, then 7 days, then 21 days.
Which makes total sense logically, because as the memory gets stronger and the curve flattens, I need to check on it less often.
Exactly. Landauer and Bjork did a very famous study in 1978 on name-face association. And they found that expanding the intervals was highly effective for long-term retention.
It's highly efficient, too.
Right, it's efficient.
Yeah.
You don't want to be reviewing a simple fact like cat equals Gato every single day for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
Eventually, you want to push that review out to once a year or even longer.
But there is a counter-argument to this expanding method.
There is. Some more recent meta-analyses have looked at the data and suggested that uniform spacing where the gap stays exactly the same say reviewing every 5 days, might work just as well in certain contexts.
Why would a uniform gap be better?
Simplicity for one thing. It's easier to schedule, but more importantly, for very complex or difficult material, expanding the interval too quickly can actually be dangerous.
Oh, because you forget it before the next review.
Right. If you jump from a 1-week interval to a 1-month interval on a highly complex physics equation, you might completely lose it. The jungle might have grown back entirely too thick.
You lost the path entirely and have to start over.
Exactly. So uniform spacing keeps that path clear for the really tough stuff. But generally speaking, the expert consensus today is that while expanding intervals are the gold standard for pure efficiency, the absolute most important factor is simply the spacing itself.
Just don't do it all at once.
Exactly. Whether the interval expands or stays the same, the critical move is stepping away from the material and coming back later. Don't mass your practice, space it out.
Okay, so we have the hard science here. We have the forgetting curve mathematically proven in the 1880s. We understand the biology of the effort principle. You would really think, knowing all this, that our entire modern education system would be built around this. I mean, schools from kindergarten to med school should just be spaced repetition factories.
You would certainly think so. It seems incredibly obvious in hindsight.
But looking at the history section of our source material, it's actually a story of massive missed opportunities. It's honestly kind of tragic.
It really is a bit of a tragedy in the field of educational psychology. We had the answer, and we largely ignored it for decades.
Let's talk about C.A. Mace.
Right, so we jump forward from Ebbinghaus to 1932. C.A. Mace writes a very influential book called The Psychology of Study. And he isn't vague about this concept at all. He explicitly proposes a distributed study schedule for students.
He literally wrote out a formula, right?
He did. He proposed review intervals of 1 day, 2 days, 4 days, 8 days. He basically laid out the exact blueprint for an algorithmic approach to studying long before personal computers even existed.
That was 1932. Just pen and paper. And then a few years later, we get actual hard proof on a massive scale. Tell me about the lost study of 1939.
This is the work of a researcher named H.F. Spitzer. And the scale of his study is mind-blowing, especially for the time. He worked with 3,600 sixth-grade students across the state of Iowa.
3,600 kids. That is a massive sample size, even by today's standards. Doing that without computers sounds like a nightmare.
It was a huge logistical feat. He was testing their retention to science facts. He divided these thousands of students into different groups. Some groups studied traditionally cramming the material. Other groups used a spaced testing schedule.
Meaning they were tested on the material at specific intervals without even restudying it.
Exactly, just retrieving it under test conditions.
And what was the result?
It was completely unequivocal. The space groups significantly outperformed the traditional groups. Spitzer proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that simply testing the students at spaced intervals stopped the forgetting curve dead in its tracks.
So we have the solid theory from Mace. We have the massive, undeniable proof from Spitzer. It's 1939. This should have radically changed everything about how we run schools.
And yet there was just silence.
What happened? How does something like that get buried?
The field of psychology just went quiet on memory. You really have to remember the academic context of the time. Behaviorism was completely taking over the field. B.F. Skinner, rats in puzzle boxes, pigeons pecking buttons.
Ah, stimulus and response.
Right. The entire focus of the scientific community shifted to operant conditioning rewards and punishments. They stopped caring about the internal cognitive architecture of memory. The whole idea of mental curves and decay rates just fell completely out of fashion.
So millions of students went through school in the 40s, 50s, and 60s thinking they were stupid because they kept forgetting things, while the actual solution was literally sitting in an academic journal on a dusty shelf.
Effectively, yes. It really highlights the massive gap that often exists between academic research and everyday practice. It wasn't until the late 60s that the cognitive revolution happened and brought memory back into focus.
And it came back through a very practical side door, which is language learning. I think a lot of our listeners will immediately recognize the name Pimsleur.
Paul Pimsleur, yes.
If you have ever tried to learn Spanish or French in your car on a CD or an app, you've probably used his method, the classic listen and repeat.
Pimsleur was a true pioneer because he took this highly abstract psychological theory and turned it into a rigid, scalable commercial product. In 1967, he published a paper called A Memory Schedule, and the precision of his schedule is amazing.
I am looking at the list here in the notes right now. It is incredibly specific. It starts with a review interval of 5 seconds.
Yes, 5 seconds. Pimsleur deeply understood that the initial memory decay happens almost instantly. It's stored in what we call the phonological loop of working memory.
So it's super fragile.
Very fragile. You hear a new sound, a brand new foreign word, and if you don't repeat it within roughly 5 seconds, it is gone.
So you repeat it at 5 seconds, then what?
Then 25 seconds, then 2 minutes, then 10 minutes, 1 hour, 5 hours, 1 day, 5 days, 25 days, 4 months, 2 years.
That is the definition of exponential growth.
He called it graduated interval recall.
Oh.
He was functionally building a bridge from that fleeting first second of hearing a word all the way out to permanent lifelong storage. He proved that you could literally engineer a memory.
It's amazing to see it codified mathematically like that, but I want to pivot a bit here because when we think of Pimsleur and when we think of flashcards generally, we usually think of simple vocabulary. We think of basic facts. Chat means cat. The capital of France is Paris.
Right, semantic memory, rote facts.
Exactly. But the sources we are looking at today suggest that spaced repetition is way more powerful than just memorizing simple lists. It's not just for trivia. Let's talk about mathematics.
This is a huge development in the literature. Traditionally, educators thought, okay, spaced repetition is great for memorization. But math is about true understanding. It's about process and logic. You don't memorize math, you do math.
Right. You don't just memorize y equals mx plus b. You have to actually understand how to graph the line on a plane.
Exactly. But a major study by Pashler, Rohrer, Sapita, and Carpenter challenged that entire distinction. They look at how spaced repetition affects a student's ability to actually solve complex math problems.
And this brings up the concept of interleaving, right?
Yes. Interleaving is crucial here. Usually math textbooks use a technique called blocking. You learn chapter 4, which is quadratic equations. Then you sit down and do 50 quadratic equations in a row for homework.
Which feels super efficient. You get to a great rhythm.
But that rhythm is actually a cognitive trap.
Mm.
By the 5th problem, you aren't really thinking anymore. You're just blindly following a recipe. You know the solution involves a quadratic equation simply because you are currently in the quadratic equation chapter.
You aren't diagnosing the problem. You're just on autopilot.
Correct. But if you use spaced repetition combined with interleaving, you mix everything up. You do one quadratic equation. Then the next problem is a geometry question from last week. Then a linear equation from last month.
See, that sounds incredibly annoying for the student.
Oh, it is highly annoying. It goes right back to that desirable difficulty we talked about.
Yeah.
Every single time you look at a new problem, you first have to ask yourself, wait, what kind of problem is this? Which tool do I pull out of my mental toolbox?
So the diagnosis is part of the practice.
Yes. That decision process, that active retrieval of the correct strategy is exactly what reinforces the deep learning.
And the study showed that this actually worked for math.
It worked incredibly well. The spaced and interleaved group didn't just remember the core formulas better. They were significantly better at applying the underlying principles to brand new unseen problems.
But there is a catch here, isn't there? The notes specifically mention the role of feedback.
Yes. For this to work in mathematics, or really any complex application, you absolutely need immediate feedback. If you struggle with a difficult problem, get it completely wrong, and don't know why you got it wrong, you might actually reinforce the error.
Right. You need that aha moment immediately after the struggle to correct the path.
Exactly. The intense struggle opens up the brain's receptivity, and the immediate feedback deposits the correct information into that open slot.
Okay, so math is one thing. That makes sense. But this next application in our sources actually gave me pause. It feels almost too high stakes. We are talking about neurosurgery.
This is from a fascinating study by Robertson and colleagues, published very recently in 2023.
We are literally talking about training medical residents to operate on human brains.
We are. And obviously, proficiency in this field is completely non-negotiable. The study looked at a complex simulation module for neurosurgery training. One group of residents trained using traditional methods, likely mass practice doing the surgical simulation over and over in a single block.
And the other group?
The other group used a spaced repetition schedule for the simulation.
And what were the results?
The surgical residents who used the spaced repetition module showed significant measurable improvements in objective performance metrics. They were tangibly better at performing complex surgical procedures.
That is wild to me. So we aren't just talking about remembering the Latin name of a specific cranial nerve. We are talking about the physical procedural skill of the surgery itself.
That is exactly the implication. It strongly suggests that spaced repetition can facilitate the acquisition of complex procedural knowledge. Think about it carefully. A surgery is essentially a sequence of steps, a sequence of high-level decisions and precise physical movements.
It's intense muscle memory.
Exactly. Strengthening the reliable recall of those procedural steps and the physical execution of them through calculated spacing leads to much better performance. It seems that the rest periods in spaced repetition actually allow the brain to quietly consolidate those physical motor patterns.
Like it's working in the background.
Yes, it might even be myelinating those specific neural pathways more effectively than just hammering away at the simulation for 4 hours straight.
It's definitely comforting in a way to know that surgeons are actively finding better ways to learn how to cut into us. But I want to move to the completely opposite end of the spectrum now. We've talked about high-performance learning in elite neurosurgery, but what about when memory fundamentally starts to fail? The sources also discuss applications for Alzheimer's and dementia.
This is, to me, the most poignant and beautiful application of this entire science. We have groundbreaking work from Camp in 1989, Small in 2012, and Jolton in 2003. They specifically looked at using spaced retrieval training for people with genuine severe memory impairments.
There is a specific story detailed in the notes about a grandmother and a photo that I found really touching.
Yes, this is from the 2003 Jolton study. They had a professional caregiver train an older woman who was suffering from Alzheimer's. The goal was incredibly simple but profoundly important. They wanted to train her to associate a name with a photo of her grandchild that was hanging on the refrigerator.
Something that most of us just take completely for granted, but for her, that reality was disappearing.
Exactly. Now, they used a very specific modified version of spaced repetition here. It's called spaced retrieval training combined with errorless learning.
How is errorless learning different from what we've discussed?
Well, normally, as we establish, we want you to struggle. We want you to maybe get it wrong so you feel that desirable difficulty.
Yeah.
But for an Alzheimer's, patient failure is deeply discouraging. It creates severe anxiety and confusion.
You're right, that makes sense.
So they intentionally do not let her fail.
How do they actually manage that in practice?
The caregiver points to the photo and says, "This is your grandson, David." "Who is this?" She replies, "David." Then they wait just 5 brief seconds. "Who is this?" "David." If she gets it right, they expand the interval to 20 seconds.
But what if she hesitates?
If she hesitates even for a second, they jump in immediately. They give her the correct name before she can guess and get it wrong. They keep the success rate artificially high, but they still rigorously stretch that time interval.
And did this actually work for her?
After the training protocol, this woman was able to independently recall the name of her grandchild 5 full days later.
5 days? That's incredible.
For someone battling Alzheimer's, retaining a brand new piece of information, or consciously re-retaining an old one for 5 whole days, is an absolute mountain. It is a huge victory.
And the true significance isn't just about memorizing a sequence of letters for a name, it is about human connection.
It absolutely is. It's about maintaining a patient's dignity. It's about maintaining their anchor to reality and to their loved ones. The broader research shows this technique helps with name-face association, remembering to perform daily tasks like locking a door or using a walker, or even just remembering their room number in a care facility.
It gives them agency.
Yes, it keeps the brain actively engaged and can improve their daily quality of life significantly.
It really just shows that this fundamental mechanism, the psychological spacing effect, is so deeply ingrained in how our physical brains work that it remains highly effective even when the physical brain is actively damaged.
That's very true.
It's like the computer's operating system is incredibly glitchy, but this one core line of code just keeps running perfectly.
That is a beautiful way to put it. It taps into something very, very deep in our biological wiring.
Okay, so we have firmly established that this works. It works for 6th graders in Iowa, it works for elite neurosurgeons, it works for dementia patients. The big practical question for you and me now is how do we actually implement it? Because I definitely don't have a team of researchers following me around my house with a stopwatch.
Right, you need a practical system.
Yeah.
And broadly looking at the history in our notes, we can break the implementation down into 3 distinct eras: the analog era, the audio era, and the digital era.
Let's start with the analog era, the famous shoebox method.
Yes, the Leitner system, named after Sebastian Leitner, who was a German science journalist.
Yeah.
He really popularized this method for everyday people in the 1970s. He wrote a hugely popular book called So Lernt Man Lernen, which translates to How to Learn to Learn.
That is a great title. Very meta.
It is. And he proposed a physical learning box. Imagine a long shoebox physically divided into 5 separate sections.
Okay, I'm visualizing the box.
All of your brand new flashcards start in box 1 at the front. These are the cards you have to review every single day, the daily grind.
The danger zone where you don't know anything yet.
Exactly. Now let's say you pick up a card from box 1, you test yourself and you get it right. You successfully recalled it. That card graduates and moves back to box 2.
And box 2 gets reviewed less often.
Yes. You might only check box 2 every 3 days. If you get it right when you review box 2, it graduates to box 3, which is maybe checked every week. Then box 4 is every 2 weeks. Then finally box 5 is every month.
So visually, as you securely learn the material, the physical card moves further and further away from your daily attention.
Right. It perfectly mirrors the expanding interval concept. But here is the brilliant mechanical rule that actually makes it work. The penalty.
What is the penalty?
Yeah. If you pick up a card from box 4, something you theoretically haven't seen in 2 weeks, and you draw a blank, you realize you've forgotten it. What do you think happens to that card?
Does it just step back to box 3?
No. It goes all the way back to the very front to box 1.
Ouch. Back to start. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200.
Straight back to the daily grind.
Yeah.
It severely penalizes mistakes by forcing you to review that forgotten material much more aggressively. It's honestly like a video game where you lose all your checkpoint progress on that specific item if you die.
It sounds kind of brutal.
It is brutal, but that strict penalty ensures that you never ever fool yourself into thinking you know something you don't. If you forgot it, you clearly need to review it more often. It is a brilliant physical representation of a complex spacing algorithm.
I do really like the tactile nature of that. It physically gamifies the learning process, but obviously managing 5 distinct boxes and potentially thousands of little paper cards sounds like an absolute administrative nightmare. You would probably spend more time sorting the paper than actually studying.
It is highly time-intensive to manage, and that is exactly why the digital revolution completely changed the game for spaced repetition.
Enter the personal computer.
Yes. In the 1980s, we start seeing the first specialized software that can handle all the complex scheduling mathematics for you in the background. You don't need physical shoeboxes anymore. You just need a database.
And this is where we get the really big names in the current field. Things like SuperMemo and Anki.
SuperMemo is really the original pioneer here. It was developed by a Polish researcher named Piotr Wozniak. He's widely considered the godfather of the modern algorithmic approach to memory.
He wrote the actual code.
Yes, he developed a progressive series of sophisticated algorithms, starting with SM2 all the way up to SM18, that attempt to mathematically optimize the exact review interval for every single card individually based on your performance.
But how does the computer actually know when I'm about to forget something? They can't read my mind or scan my brain.
It asks you. This introduces the crucial concept of confidence-based repetition. When you flip a digital flashcard in a popular app like Anki, you don't just mark it as strictly right or wrong, you actually rate your subjective confidence in your answer, usually on a scale of 1 to 4. The buttons usually say, again, hard, good, and easy.
So hitting again means I failed completely and drew a blank. Hitting easy means I knew it instantly without thinking.
Exactly. And that specific button press determines the entire mathematical future of that card. If you rate it easy, the algorithm applies a large multiplier. It says, okay, you knew this after 5 days with 0 effort. Let's push it way out. Let's try 15 days next time.
But if I hit the hard button?
The algorithm said, whoa, okay, you barely got that one. We're close to the forgetting threshold. Let's rein it in and see it again in maybe 6 days instead of 15. It dynamically adjusts the forgetting curve specifically for your unique brain and specifically for that one individual fact.
So it's effectively tailoring thousands of distinct forgetting curves simultaneously.
Yes. It allows for truly massive scaling of knowledge. You can literally have 10,000 cards in your active deck. Medical students and language learners do this all the time, and the software ensures you only spend your valuable time today reviewing the 50 specific cards you are statistically about to forget.
That is the ultimate definition of efficiency.
It really is. And the modern algorithms are getting even more sophisticated as we speak. There is a mention in our source notes of a new system called FSRS, which stands for Free Spaced Repetition Scheduler.
FSRS, that sounds very high-tech.
It is extremely high-tech. It essentially uses machine learning and complex neural networks. Instead of relying on a static mathematical formula like the older SuperMemo models, FSRS actively analyzes your entire personal history of past reviews to continuously predict your exact probability of recall with incredible accuracy.
So it learns how you learn.
Exactly. It's basically using AI to constantly remodel your personal memory decay rate in real time.
It's almost like having an elite personal trainer for your hippocampus who knows exactly how strong every single microscopic muscle fiber is at any given moment.
That is precisely what it is doing.
Okay, so we have the digital tools. We clearly understand the underlying science. What does this all fundamentally mean for us as everyday learners? Because it really feels like most of us are still deeply stuck in that read the textbook 3 times with a highlighter mindset.
We absolutely are. And I think the single biggest takeaway here, beyond simply telling people to go use flashcard apps, is shifting our understanding of the testing effect.
The testing effect. Tell me more about that.
In traditional education, we tend to think of a test purely as an evaluation tool, a way to measure what you have already learned. You study the material and then you take a test to see if the studying worked. The test is just the final judgment.
Right. The test is the scary ending to the process.
But the rigorous science of spaced repetition shows us that the very act of testing is actually the learning itself. Actively retrieving the hidden information, pulling it out of your brain under pressure, is exactly what physically strengthens the neural connection.
Oh, wow.
Testing shouldn't just be the end of the learning process. It should be the primary engine of the process itself.
So instead of just reading the chapter again and again, you should close the book, stare at the wall, and try to explain the concept out loud to an empty room. Or actively test yourself with a question.
Yes, active recall. That is the engine that drives true learning. The spacing algorithm just optimizes the fuel efficiency of that engine. If you are merely reading, you are being passive. If you are testing yourself, you are being active.
And it really completely changes the way you look at failure, too. In this algorithmic model, getting a question wrong isn't a bad thing at all. It's just a neutral data point for the system.
Exactly. It removes all the heavy emotional baggage from forgetting. Forgetting isn't a character flaw or a sign of low intelligence. It is just a biological signal that the review interval was scheduled slightly too long. The digital algorithm sees the failure and simply says, okay, noted. We will review this item a little sooner next time.
I love that perspective. Forgetting isn't a character flaw. It's literally just biology.
It's just inputs and outputs in the neural network.
So as we start to wrap up this deep dive today, I'm really left with this lingering sense that we as a society are leaving so much human potential on the table by not integrating this universally. But I also have a big question about where this is all ultimately going, because we talked about these algorithms getting better and better with machine learning.
Right. The AI integration is moving fast.
And the research clearly suggests the absolute best study schedule is highly learner dependent. My brain's decay rate is completely different from your brain's decay rate. And the FSRS algorithm knows that.
Absolutely. It maps your unique topography.
So here is my provocative closing thought for the day. Are we inevitably moving toward a future where education is entirely algorithmic? I mean, imagine a world where a black box computer program decides the exact second you need to review a specific fact in order to keep it in your brain forever.
It is a genuinely fascinating, slightly dystopian, but also incredibly utopian possibility to think about.
Right. It's utopian because we could theoretically learn absolutely anything efficiently. We could master quantum physics or Mandarin. But it's somewhat dystopian because, well, do we lose our own agency? Do we lose control of our own minds?
That's the core philosophical issue. If we completely offload the management and scheduling of our memory to an AI system, do we free up our biological brains for much higher level creative thinking? Or do we just become entirely dependent on the machine to literally know what we know?
It's exactly like using GPS on our phones. I honestly don't know how to navigate my own city anymore because the little blue dot just tells me where to turn. Will I eventually lose the basic cognitive ability to manage my own learning process if the Anki algorithm does all the heavy lifting for me?
That is the ultimate question we have to face. We might all eventually become what you could call cyborg learners. But frankly, if plugging into that cyborg system means I can effortlessly speak 5 languages and easily perform complex neurosurgery, maybe it's actually worth the trade-off.
That is a very fair point. Honestly, looking at my old college transcripts, I think I would probably take the trade in a heartbeat.
I think I would be right there with you.
Well, on that note, I think I have some digital flashcards to go make. I need to actively reinforce my memory of this fascinating conversation before the forgetting curve kicks in and I lose 40% of it.
You've got about 20 minutes before that steep drop-off begins, so you better get to it.
I better hurry. Thanks for joining us, and thanks for listening to The Deep Dive. We will see you next time.
See you next time. Okay, I have a challenge for you. No Google, no glancing at your phone, and definitely no consulting Siri. I want you to name the 7 wonders of the world.
Ah, the classic trivia trap. And I'm willing to bet that if you're listening to this, you probably, you rattled off 3, maybe 4, and then you started improvising.
Oh, for sure. You probably said the Great Wall of China.
Maybe the Colosseum. Perhaps the Taj Mahal.
I actually tried this on a friend of mine who is a huge history buff. He got the pyramids, obviously,
Yeah.
and he said the Hanging Gardens. And then there was this long pause, and he said, Stonehenge.
And you can't really blame him. The term 7 Wonders has become this, this cultural catch-all for big, impressive, old stuff.
Exactly. But the actual history of these lists, and it is emphatically lists, plural, is just this chaotic mess of tourism, engineering, political lobbying, and, well, eventually interplanetary geology.
It is a mess, but it's a revealing one. It's a fascinating look at the evolution of human values, isn't it? Well, we started with what were essentially travel brochures for Greek aristocrats. Then we moved through this centuries-long period of historical confusion and romanticism.
And then it took a sharp turn.
A very sharp turn toward functional civil engineering in the 20th century. And finally, we ended up voting on the internet like it was American Idol.
So that is our mission today. We're going to catalog the impossible. We're unpacking the history of the ultimate bucket list. And we aren't just looking at the monuments themselves, though we will get into the nitty-gritty of, how you actually build a lighthouse in 280 BC.
Right. We're looking at why humans feel this deep, primal need to rank, stack, and catalog the spectacular.
And what we're going to find is that this isn't just about big piles of stone.
Not at all. It's about how our definition of wonder has shifted from myth to utility and finally to preservation.
Okay, let's start at the source code, the original 7, the canonical ancient list. My first question looking at all this research was, why 7? We love a top 10 list. We're a base 10 society. Why 7?
It's a great question. We do love base 10 now. But for the ancient Greeks, specifically in the Hellenistic period, around the 3rd and 2nd centuries, BC 7 wasn't just a number, it was the number.
Like it had a special meaning.
A huge meaning.
Yeah.
Pythagoras, the mathematician, he revered 7 because it was a prime number that couldn't be divided. It implied this kind of structural integrity and perfection.
Look, it goes beyond just the math, right? It's cosmological.
Exactly. Look up at the sky in antiquity. What do you see moving against the backdrop of the stars?
The planets.
Right. You've got 5 planets you can see with the naked eye. Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, plus the sun and the moon.
That makes 7.
That makes 7 celestial bodies that, to them, dictated the entire rhythm of the universe.
So if you're going to catalog the greatest achievements on Earth, you want that list to mirror the perfection of the heavens.
Precisely. It represents plenty and perfection. If you had 8 wonders, it would feel, I don't know, messy, excessive. It would break that cosmic symmetry they were so obsessed with.
Okay, so we call this the canonical list, but it's not like there was some central committee in Athens ratifying it. Who was actually writing these things down?
That's the tricky part. There wasn't one single official list at first. Herodotus mentioned wonders. Callimachus of Cyrene, a scholar at the Library of Alexandria, wrote a whole treatise on it, but that text it's completely lost to history.
So what do we have?
The main sources we rely on today are a poem by a guy named Antipater of Sidon, written around 140 BC, and then a later work by a mathematician named Philo of Byzantium.
And Antipater wasn't writing a history book. He was basically writing a travel blog.
He absolutely was. The Greek word they used wasn't themata, which means miracles. It was theamata.
Which means?
Sights, things to be seen. This was a to-do list for wealthy Greek or Roman tourists who could finally travel safely around the Mediterranean.
Right, because of the stability after Alexander the Great's conquests.
Exactly. The Hellenistic kingdoms opened up the world for them.
That explains the geography then. I noticed there's nothing from India, nothing from China, nothing from the Americas. It's a very specific Alexander the Great footprint.
It's the Hellenistic bubble. It's the Mediterranean Rim and the ancient Near East. If Alexander or his successors didn't control it, well, it didn't make the list.
But here's the thing that really surprised me. We talk about this ancient list as if it was carved in stone in 300 BC. But the canonical list, the specific 7 we all learn in school, wasn't actually finalized until, wait for it, 1572.
That's right. The Octo Mundi Miracula.
Which, My Latin is rusty, but that translates to 8 wonders of the world, right?
It does. It was a text by a Dutch artist, Martin van Heemskerk, who produced this amazing series of engravings. He's the one who standardized the list we use today.
But he included 8.
He did. He put the Colosseum on there as an 8th wonder. But because of that magic number bias we just talked about, the branding was just too strong. The Colosseum got dropped, and we stuck with the 7.
So let's do a deep dive into that canonical 7. I want to get into the engineering, because some of these claims just seem impossible. First up, the heavyweight champion, the Great Pyramid of Giza.
The oldest, and of course the only one still in existence today, built around 2560 BC for the pharaoh Khufu.
The survival rate of this list is terrible. It's literally 1 out of 7. But the pyramid, I mean, we all know what it looks like, but the precision is what gets me.
It's baffling. The base is a near-perfect square, and the sides are aligned to the 4 cardinal points, north, south, east, west, with an accuracy of 3/60ths of a degree.
That's insane.
We struggle to do that today with modern surveying equipment. And remember, this was built before the wheel was even widely used for transport in Egypt. They used sledges and wet sand to reduce friction.
It used to look different, didn't it? It wasn't this sort of stepped, sandy-colored structure we see now.
No, not at all. It was originally encased in highly polished white Tura limestone. It would have shown, like a brilliant white star in the desert sun.
And the capstone.
The pyramidion, at the very top, was likely plated in gold or electrum. It was designed to be blindingly beautiful.
Okay, moving to something that definitely did not survive. The Colossus of Rhodes. This is the one where pop culture gets it all wrong. I always pictured it straddling the harbor entrance, like in Game of Thrones.
The legs spanning the harbor image is a complete medieval invention. Engineering-wise, it's just impossible.
Right.
If the statue had its legs that wide apart, it would have collapsed under its own weight. Not to mention, it would have blocked the entire harbor during construction.
So what was it, actually?
It was a massive bronze statue of the sun god Helios. It stood about 33 meters high, so roughly the size of the Statue of Liberty, from her heel to her crown. And it stood on a pedestal near the harbor entrance, not over it.
And the construction was interesting. It wasn't a single solid cast.
No, you couldn't possibly cast something that big in one go back then. It was built in sections, using cast bronze plates riveted to an iron framework. And then, this is the low-tech part, they filled the hollow legs and the lower body with stones to weigh it down so it wouldn't, tip over in the wind.
But it didn't last long at all.
No, only about 54 years. An earthquake hit Rhodes in 226 BC, and the statue snapped at the knees and fell onto the land.
And it just lay there.
For over 800 years. It became a tourist attraction in its own right. People would travel just to see the ruins. The writer Pliny the Elder said that the broken thumb was larger than most statues.
Wow. Next up, the ghost of the list. The Hanging Gardens of Babylon.
This is the most controversial one. We're still not 100% sure they even existed. Or if they did, where exactly they were.
The story goes that they were in Babylon, built by Nebuchadnezzar II for his wife, Amytas.
Right, because she missed the green hills of her homeland. But archaeologists have dug up Babylon pretty thoroughly, and they haven't found any evidence of a pump system or the massive terraces described in the texts.
Which has led to a fascinating modern theory.
A really cool one by Dr. Stephanie Daly from Oxford. She argues we've all been looking in the wrong city. She suggests the gardens were actually in Nineveh, the capital of the Assyrian Empire, built by a king named Sennacherib.
And the evidence for that is what, linguistic?
Partly. The ancient Greeks often confused Babylon and Nineveh. They were both major Mesopotamian cities. But also, Nineveh actually has archaeological evidence of a massive aqueduct system and Archimedes' screws used to raise water. It fits the description of the gardens perfectly.
So the Hanging Gardens of Nineveh. Like it. Okay, let's talk about the Lighthouse of Alexandria. This wasn't just a statue. This was a functional machine.
It was a true marvel, the Pharos, built on an island in the harbor of Alexandria, Egypt. Estimates put it somewhere between 100 and 130 meters tall.
So for context, that's like a 40-story building.
A 40-story building constructed in the 3rd century BC, yes.
And the light itself. There are all these stories about a giant mirror.
That's right. At the very top, there was a fire that burned at night, but during the day, they used a massive mirror-likely polished bronze to reflect the sun. Some ancient sources claim you could see the light from over 30 miles away.
And there are even those legends that the mirror could focus the sun to burn enemy ships.
Which is almost certainly a myth, an Archimedes' death ray situation, but it speaks to how advanced the optics must have seemed to the ancients.
And it stood for a long time.
Over 1,000 years. It was damaged by a series of earthquakes in the medieval period, and eventually the Mamluk Sultan Qaitbay used the fallen stones to build a fortress on the exact same spot. So if you visit the Citadel of Qaitbay today, you are literally looking at the recycled bones of the lighthouse.
Then we have the mausoleum at Halicarnassus. This is in modern-day Bodrum in Turkey.
Right. This was the tomb of Mausolus, who was a satrap in the Persian Empire. It was so magnificent, so grand, that his name, Mausolus, became the root word for any grand tomb, a mausoleum.
What made it a wonder? Was it just its size?
It was the aesthetic fusion. Mausolus was a guy who lived at this crossroads of cultures, so his tomb combined Greek columns, an Egyptian pyramid-style roof, and Latian sculpture. It was this weird, beautiful architectural remix.
Next, the statue of Zeus at Olympia.
This was located inside the temple at the sanctuary of Olympia. This was the work of Phidias, who was basically the greatest sculptor of antiquity, the rock star.
And we aren't talking about marble here, are we?
No, this was chryselephantine.
Chryselephantine.
It means a wooden core covered in plates of gold and ivory. The skin of Zeus was made of ivory. His robes and his beard were all gold. It was about 12 meters tall, and he was seated on a throne.
The geographer Strabo famously noted that if Zeus had stood up, he would have unroofed the temple.
It was designed to absolutely overwhelm you. You'd walk into this dark temple, and there, gleaming in the gloom, was this golden giant. It was all about religious awe.
And finally, the Temple of Artemis at Ephesus.
The largest of them all. It was massive, roughly the size of an American football field. It had double rows of columns surrounding the main chamber. It was far, far larger than the Parthenon in Athens.
And this one has the most dramatic story of destruction.
Oh, yeah. July 21st, 356 BC. A man named Herostratus set fire to the wooden roof beams. When they caught him and tortured him to ask why he did it, he said he did it simply so his name would be immortalized.
He just wanted to be famous.
He was the world's first clout chaser via an act of terrorism. The Ephesians were so horrified that they not only executed him, they passed a law damnatio memoriae forbidding anyone from ever speaking his name again under penalty of death.
Which, ironically, failed spectacularly.
The Streisand effect of antiquity. Here we are, 2,300 years later, talking about Herostratus. But if you look at this list as a whole, you realize something. This wasn't a history book.
It was a Michelin guide.
It was. It was a celebration of human-made spectacle. It was celebrating the fact that, hey, look what we humans can build.
But then, antiquity ends. The classical world fades. The Library of Alexandria burns. And we enter this fuzzy period where the list starts to get weird. We see all these references online to the wonders of the Middle Ages or the medieval mind.
Right, and we need to unpack this immediately because it's one of the biggest misconceptions in popular history. You'll see these lists with Stonehenge, the Great Wall of China, the Leaning Tower of Pisa.
But the catch is?
The catch is that people in the Middle Ages didn't call themselves medieval.
Of course not. They just called it now.
Exactly. The concept of a Middle Age, implying you're stuck between two better things, antiquity and the Renaissance, that term didn't become popular until the 16th century. The word medieval wasn't even invented until the Enlightenment.
So no monk in the year 1200 sat down and wrote a list titled Wonders of the Medieval World.
Absolutely not. These lists are retrofitted. Brewer's Dictionary of Phrase and Fable, which is a great source for debunking this stuff, calls them later lists. They were compiled by writers in the 19th and 20th centuries who looked back and tried to create a bridge between the ancient and the modern.
And because they were just grabbing cool stuff from history without checking the dates, the timeline is a complete disaster. I mean, Stonehenge.
Stonehenge is Neolithic. It was built between 3000 and 2000 BC. That's contemporary with the pyramids. It's thousands of years before the Middle Ages even began.
What about the Great Wall of China?
That one's a bit more nuanced. The wall exists in sections, and the early walls date back to the 7th century BC. But the iconic wall we all see in photos, the brick and stone structure with the watchtowers.
That's the Ming Dynasty wall.
Exactly. The Ming Dynasty ran from 1368 to 1644. So technically, the very beginning of it is late medieval, but most of it is actually early modern.
Okay, so a few of them do kind of fit, though. The Leaning Tower of Pisa.
That fits. Construction began in the 12th century. So sure, that's medieval. And Hagia Sophia in Istanbul was built in the 6th century, so it bridges that gap between late antiquity and the early Middle Ages.
It seems like this list is just a greatest hits of pre-industrial engineering. But the real shift, the moment where we stop looking at art and start looking at pure utility, that happens much, much later.
Right. This is where it gets really interesting for me. Because for centuries, a wonder was something you just looked at. It was aesthetic. You stood in front of this statue of Zeus and felt small. But then in 1994, the American Society of Civil Engineers, the ASCE, decided to crash the party.
And they completely reframed the conversation. They weren't interested in beauty in the traditional sense. They wanted to honor the greatest civil engineering achievements of the 20th century.
This list is hardcore. It's not about gold plates or ivory statues. It's about concrete, steel, and conquering nature.
It's a total paradigm shift. If the ancient list is man honoring God, the AE list is man controlling the environment.
Well said. Let's look at their picks, because each one represents a specific kind of triumph. First, the Panama Canal.
The ultimate example of altering geography. This wasn't just digging a ditch.
Not at all. France tried it first in the 1880s and failed miserably. They lost 20,000 men to yellow fever and malaria. It was an engineering war zone.
So when the U.S. takes over in 1904, the first thing they have to do isn't engineering, it's medicine.
Exactly. They had to essentially eradicate the mosquito from the canal zone before they could pour a single cubic meter of concrete effectively. And then you have the engineering of the Gatun locks. It's just breathtaking, lifting ships 85 feet above sea level to cross a continent.
Next on their list, the Golden Gate Bridge, completed in 1937.
And people said it couldn't be done. The winds were too high, the fog was too thick, the tides were too strong.
It's a suspension bridge, right? So the roadway hangs from these massive cables.
Yeah, those main cables are 3 feet thick, made of 27,000 individual wires spun together. And the color, the international orange, that was actually just the primer, but the consulting architect saw it and said, wait, that looks amazing against the blue water and the fog. So they kept it.
Then we have the Channel Tunnel.
The channel.
Connecting the UK and France.
Yeah.
31 miles long, with 23 of those miles under the ocean floor.
The psychology of that is just wild. You're on a train underneath the sea.
And the engineering feat was the precision. They started digging from the UK side and the French side at the same time. They had to meet in the middle, deep underground. When they finally broke through in 1990, the two sides were misaligned by only 35 centimeters.
That is mind-blowing accuracy. What about the Itaipu Dam?
On the border of Brazil and Paraguay. In terms of just raw steel and concrete, it's massive. But the real wonder is the energy. It generates enough electricity to power roughly 75% of Paraguay and nearly 20% of Brazil. It's the beating heart of two nations. And the last one on their list, which I think is the most overlooked, but maybe the most important, the Netherlands North Sea Protection Works.
The Delta Works. This is a national survival mechanism. The Netherlands sits largely below sea level. After the disastrous flood of 1953, they just said, never again.
And it's not just one dam, is it? It's a whole system.
It's a web of dams, sluices, locks, dikes, and storm surge barriers. The Oester-Schelde-Kering barrier is particularly impressive. It has these massive sliding gates that can slam shut when a storm hits. It's the ultimate example of a country engineering its own existence.
See, I love this shift. We went from my king built a big tomb to we figured out how to stop the ocean from drowning us.
It reflects a democratization of wonders. These aren't just for the elite.
Yeah.
Millions of people use the Channel Tunnel or rely on the power from Itaipu.
Speaking of democratization, let's fast forward to the 21st century. The Internet age. In 2001, a Swiss filmmaker named Bernard Weber starts a project called New Seven Wonders.
And this is where the definition of a wonder shifts again from expert consensus to global popularity contest.
The idea was simple. Let the world vote. They picked 200 existing monuments, put them online, and supposedly over 100 million votes were cast.
Which sounds great in theory, this idea of global participation. But in practice, it led to some very funny, very intense geopolitical dynamics. Countries started campaigning for their monuments like they were politicians running for office.
Brazil had these massive vote for the Christ campaigns. Jordan pushed hard for Petra.
Which led to the Great Giza controversy.
Oh, this was awkward. So the Great Pyramid of Giza, the only surviving ancient wonder, was on the ballot. And the Egyptian antiquities officials were, well, they were insulted.
Deeply. Their head of antiquities, Zahi Hawass, basically said, excuse me, you want the pyramids to compete with the Sydney Opera House. We've been standing for 4,500 years. We define the list. We don't need your vote.
They felt it was degrading.
Exactly. So the organizers caved, they pulled Giza from the voting and gave it honorary candidate status. It's like the Lifetime Achievement Award of Wonders.
So who actually won the popularity contest? Let's run through the winners from 2007.
It's a very geographically diverse list, which is a huge improvement. The Great Wall of China, no surprise there. Petra in Jordan, the Rose City carved into rock.
Christ the Redeemer in Brazil, Machu Picchu in Peru.
The Incan citadel in the clouds. The engineering there is all about earthquakes. They use these dry stone walls. Stones fit so perfectly without mortar that they can move during a quake and then settle back into place.
Chichen Itza in Mexico.
The Mayan city. The El Castillo Pyramid is basically a calendar made of stone. It has 365 steps.
The Colosseum in Italy, finally getting its due. And the Taj Mahal in India.
It's a solid list. You can't really argue with any of those being wonders, but you can see the bias of the vote, can't you?
It's the Instagram list.
It's the Instagram list. These are the most photogenic, most iconic tourist destinations on Earth.
Okay, so we've done the ancient, the engineering, and the popular. But what I love about this topic are the subcultures of wonders that nobody talks about. The niche lists. This is where we see true passion.
Let's talk about the 7 wonders of the underwater world.
This was put together by GandM International, a group of divers and marine scientists. And this list marks a total shift in philosophy. It's not about building things.
It's about preserving things.
Yep.
Exactly. So you get the Belize Barrier Reef, Lake Baikal in Russia, but you also get things like deep-sea hydrothermal vents.
The black smokers.
Yeah. These are volcanic vents on the ocean floor, spewing superheated water, and around them you find entire ecosystems, giant tube worms, blind shrimp that exist without any sunlight. They rely on chemosynthesis, not photosynthesis.
To a marine biologist, that is infinitely more wonderful than a stone pyramid. It's the wonder of life finding a way where it has no business existing.
It's a pivot from look what humans did to look what Earth did.
Now let's swing back to humans for a second. The Industrial Wonders. This comes from a book and a BBC series. This is for the steampunk fans.
The iron and steam era, the grit of the Industrial Revolution. You've got things like the SS Great Eastern, a massive ship built by Isambard Kingdom Brunel.
But my absolute favorite entry on this list, and maybe my favorite dark horse candidate for any world wonder list, is the London sewer system.
Yes, Joseph Bazalgette's masterpiece.
It sounds ridiculous to call a sewer a wonder. Imagine explaining that to an ancient Greek. In the future, one of our greatest wonders will be the drains.
But look at the context. Mid-19th century London, the Great Stink of 1858. The Thames was literally fermenting with human waste. Cholera was rampant.
And people were dying by the thousands.
Bazalgette didn't just lay pipes. He built over 1,000 miles of sewers. He terraformed the underground of a major metropolis. And in doing so, he probably saved more lives than the Great Wall and the pyramids combined.
It brings us back to that definition. Is a wonder something that makes you say, wow, or is it something that allows civilization to even exist?
Exactly. The London sewers are the great unseen wonder.
Which connects back to that ASCE list. But if we want to talk about ultimate scale, we have to leave the planet entirely.
The 7 wonders of the solar system.
This is from Astronomy magazine. And this just puts everything else into perspective. We think Mount Everest is big.
Everest is a speed bump compared to Olympus Mons on Mars.
Give me the specs on it.
It's a shield volcano the size of the state of Arizona. It's about 21 kilometers high, so 2.5 times the height of Everest. It actually pokes out of the thin Martian atmosphere.
That is terrifying and awesome. What else is on the cosmic list?
The rings of Saturn, the great red spot of Jupiter, a storm that's been raging for at least 400 years and is bigger than Earth. And Enceladus, a moon of Saturn with geysers shooting water into space from a subsurface ocean.
So we started with a statue trying to mimic the heavens, and now our wonders are the heavens themselves.
It's a trajectory of expansion. We started by looking at our neighborhood, the Mediterranean, then our planet, then our tools, and now we're looking at our context, the solar system.
So let's wrap this up. What is the takeaway here? Why do we keep making these lists?
I think it's because the definition of wonder changes as we change. In the ancient world, wonder was about power and myth. Look at this giant god we built.
Then in the modern era, it became about capability and connectivity.
Look how we bridged this strait. And now, wonder is shifting toward appreciation. Whether it's a coral reef or a storm on Jupiter, we are awed by the things we didn't build.
It's humbling.
It is. The list is a mirror. You tell me what your 7 wonders are, and I'll tell you what your society values.
That's a powerful thought. So here's a question I want to leave everyone with today. We've gone from the pyramids to the sewer system to the internet to Mars. If we project this forward, 500 years from now, what's on the list?
That is the question, isn't it?
Will it be biological? You know, a new species we engineer? Will it be digital consciousness uploaded to a cloud? Or will it be something like a terraform structure on Mars?
Or maybe, just maybe, the list will include something we managed to preserve from right now. Maybe the wonder of the year 2500 will be the last glacier or the Great Barrier Reef.
The wonder of preservation.
Exactly. The fact that we managed not to destroy it might be the greatest wonder of all.
A bit somber, but hopeful. It puts the responsibility on us.
It does.
Well, until we start terraforming Mars, I guess we'll just have to appreciate the sewers and the bridges we have. Thanks for exploring the impossible with us today.
Always a pleasure.